with my colleague.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Dan Okanya, Head Policy and Research at the Federation of Uganda Employers. Thank you.
You're welcome. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great privilege for me, Chair and honorable members, to present to you. I will not say you gave me short notice because I was already working. So we are already undertaking a survey. The survey is not complete, but what I present now are preliminary findings that we have. First of all, we now understand very well that this is no longer a health emergency alone anymore. It's also a social and economic disaster that we need to deal with. The ILO is estimating that if the situation continues like this, globally about 195 million people will lose their jobs. In just 6 weeks alone in the US, about 30 million people have filed for unemployment. So the situation is quite dire. Now, we all know that a job is the best form of social protection. It's what gives us dignity as a human being. If we are able to earn a living, then we can have a decent life. Now, in Uganda, the situation is challenging for one reason. The level of vulnerability is quite high. Actually, the level of vulnerability is estimated at about 43%. These are people who basically earn hand to mouth, meaning if they're out of work for a period of just 2 or 3 months, they basically have nothing to live on. They don't have any savings at all. So it's in other words, the only way they can continue to have a decent life is to continue to work, is to continue to earn. And that's also, of course, worsened by already a difficult situation that our poverty level is at 21%. So we are talking about a level of vulnerability which is above 50%. So what we are coming to the committee here to present is about really keeping the employers in business. And if we keep employers in business, we can save the jobs. Several reports have already been published, including by the Economic Policy Research Center based in Makerere. The UN has also done some work. We are finishing our own, but I'm happy to highlight a few things to this committee. Now, we have had already some responses from the government, which we appreciate, very positive one. Deferrals, for instance, NSSF has already given the employers the opportunity to defer their NSSF contribution. That initially given for 3 months, but as you can see, the situation has not changed at all. So the 3 months maybe is a little too short because the employers are hard pressed. They are still trying to charge penalties and interest for those who will pay after July, which I think is not right at all. Now, let me move on to just present a bit of what is happening at the moment. For the manufacturers, the issue of inventories, especially linked to transport, which keeps getting complicated all the time. Actually, now we are talking about the border in Kenya being very problematic, and this is one of their supply routes. The issue of slowdown in production, even when manufacturers are allowed to operate, most of them are operating at only 25% of their capacity because of the standard operating procedures which they have to comply with. It's very difficult for most of them. It's also challenging for the people in the floriculture, the flower exporters. For a long period of time, they're basically not doing business. And yet they have employees. And they employ over 10,000 Ugandans. This is a significant number that we need to take into account. The tourism sector, we are all familiar with what is happening in tourism and hospitality, not only locally here, but also globally. Business has gone down. Occupancy in some cases is less than 20%. If you take our major hotels like Sheraton, Serena, who rely a lot on foreign guests, it's very difficult. So it's quite problematic for them. The real estate sector, everybody is saying how landlords should not charge rent, but these guys also, they borrow to make these mega investments, and they have challenges of their own. So if they don't have to collect rent, then how will they manage? How will they keep their assets? The petroleum sector, similar challenges. I've put a summary of the sectors of employment in Uganda. The statistics is of 2016, 2017, no current one, but what we are doing now, we will be able to provide some detailed sector-based statistics. So, Honorable Chair, I've summarized on page 6 a few of the things that employers are doing, especially with regards to employment. They've been trying to provide more information on the COVID pandemic. In some cases, companies like Coca-Cola, for instance, has dedicated most of its PR budgets towards educating the masses with regards to the pandemic. We have also seen quite a number of employers contributing to the national cause, contributing to the fund. They are also doing quite a number of things internally. On the same page, I summarize a few countries and what they're doing, what our governments elsewhere are doing. I start with the mostly developed countries. For instance, like the US. They've put in place a loan scheme for businesses. Up to 367 billion loan program has been put for companies to be able to survive, but also some which are specific, for instance, to industry, about 500 billion, and then even going right up to the local level, the municipalities, what we would call, in our cases, the local governments. Money has also been made available right up to that level, not just at the central level. In some cases, rich governments, like in Hong Kong, for instance, they're giving even individuals about $1,200 because, of course, they can afford. They have unemployment benefits arrangements. In the UK, they have also started to offer subsidies. Across Europe, they're giving wage subsidies. Most countries are giving wage subsidies to employers. But close to home, just in our neighborhood here in Kenya, they have given tax relief for those who are earning just about up to about $240, which is like 900,000 Ugandan shillings. They are not paying payee anymore, so that people can have a lot more disposable income available to them. They have also reduced the threshold for payee from 30% to 25%. They have also reduced, already their VAT was lower than the one we charged. They were charging 16%, but they have even reduced it further to 14%. In South Africa, they have committed a stimulus package, the equivalent of 10% of their GDP, basically $26 billion US. Now, also in Ghana, they have made a fund available, a package available for SME, about $100 million, which they think would benefit about 200,000 small and medium enterprises. So quite a number of things are being done. But in general, we could call them in 3 areas. First, containing the pandemic, which we have done quite well in Uganda, the health challenges, ensuring that fewer people are infected, and then cushioning the effects, ensuring that we are keeping ourselves healthy, but we are not dying in the process out of anger and all these other problems that would come to us. And then, of course, then eventually preparing for the recovery period. Now, I've highlighted a few of those issues on page 7, the 3rd paragraph, the summary of what governments are doing around the world. Now, based on this, Chair, what are we proposing? First and foremost, we are looking at a waiver of payee, because payee forms a significant proportion of the wage bill. if you waive of pay, for instance, for 2 to 3 months, as we are proposing, then you make more liquidity. Then you make more cash available for the employer to be able to meet their obligations, quite a number of them. The NSSF, they have rescheduled for, allowing rescheduling for a period of 3 months, but we think that is rather short. We are looking at a period of 6 to 8 months, given that we don't even see an end immediately of this pandemic we are facing at the moment. But we also think we could take advantage of this situation to cause the necessary reforms. We have talked a lot about NSSF, but NSSF could, for instance, provide an employment benefit to people who have lost employment. Right now, the legal framework doesn't allow for that. It could provide for health care for people who are contributing, but right now it's not possible. Basically, out-of-pocket expenses for health is one of the reasons why Ugandans are poor. So by providing for health insurance, we actually make the conditions better for people. The other, of course, could be corporate tax relief during this period if companies could be allowed to utilize that instead to recapitalize their businesses to continue to operate better. Now on page 8, Honorable Chair and members, we propose a relief fund. I've already talked about, for instance, in South Africa, they are providing the equivalent of 10% of their GDP for relief. In our case, we are just proposing that the government could consider just up to 30% of its revenue. The NSSF could participate in this process. We have engaged them, and they're open to, if the government were to issue such a bond, they're open to participate in that process. They could then make the money available. Businesses could either get it free interest or at a very subsidized interest. The other, of course, are tax credits, and we think there are employers who are struggling to keep employees at work right now, using their other money. They may not be making any significant money now, but they're trying to use their reserves, their savings or profits from prior year to try and keep people at work. Maybe the government should recognize these efforts. They could be given tax credits which they can use in the future if they commit to keeping their employees at this point. And then the other, of course, is government procurement. Government is the single biggest buyer of goods and services in this country. Recently, we passed our budget. It's about 45 trillion. That's almost half of the money we have in circulation. It's government budget because we have just about 100 trillion or so. Now, if government commits to procuring things locally, then money would be available both for the workers and the employees to be able to take advantage of it. The other we are looking at is job protection through enterprise assistance, direct support to some companies. You have heard people talking about companies that are too big to collapse. We have them here in Uganda. Companies that employ thousands of our people in agriculture, in manufacturing. These companies, we could actually intervene by having wage subsidies, supporting them to stay afloat. Because we know if they collapse, a lot will go with it. The economy will suffer, so many people will suffer, so we protect them. So it's important to consider wage subsidies, especially for companies that employ large numbers of people. The other, of course, is investment in infrastructure. The government, the recent budget, it's about 5.8 trillion. If we commit the Bubu way like we are proposing, and then make it possible for employers locally to get contracts to do these investments. Most of these infrastructure investments are labor intensive. A lot of people, for instance, now, a lot of people around Kampala don't have what to do. The people who are taxi tots, for instance, moving around here, they have nowhere to go, basically. If the taxis don't operate, what will those guys be doing? But if you have mega infrastructure investments being done, it's possible for these guys to get work. It's possible for them to be taken to do work in specific sites. The other thing we are proposing is making credit available. We have heard about the issue of recapitalization of UDB. Let's make it work. Let's make it possible for our businesses, for the SMEs, but also for the large ones, to be able to get money. Opportunities are coming up, of course, but you need to be prepared with the necessary financial resources to be able to invest. Not everybody is capable of reinvesting using their own resources. Some might need external support from government. And then, of course, I've explained the government is the biggest buyer. So I go to the issue of arrears. If they pay those arrears, it can improve the conditions for many businesses and keep them running. There is the issue, Honorable Chair, of number 12, below the page, on the issue of digital tax stamps, which is mostly applying to the beverages. This money is increasing the cost on these manufacturers by 20%. But we are also aware that many of them use our local resources. I've listed just a few communities where they're buying from Acholi, from Ankole, Busoga, Lao, where I come from, Kigezi, Sebe, Teso. So across the country, they're procuring quite a number of things. But if we increase their production costs, and remember, the digital stamps are actually not locally procured. They're internationally procured. That would mean we even pay a lot more money externally during this difficult time when we have to keep a lot of the money locally for ourselves. So we are proposing that it be stayed. They were proposing that this would be shifted in the new financial year to the manufacturers, but we hope the government could stay this, allow them this period to regain. In future, URA can be able to start collecting this again, but we think it's not the right time to be able to be doing this. And then, of course, the banks. We are proposing, where possible, loan periods be extended between 6 to 12 months, but we're also advising that interest rates could be lowered as well. We are also proposing the issue of VAT waiver, especially in the hotel and tourism sector. I've just talked about in Kenya, it has actually been reduced across the board from 16 to 14. Ours is still at 18. On number 15, we're looking at readiness of the workforce, even post-COVID. Now we should already be planning and putting mega investments, work centers that we had already initially started preliminary work. Let's have those rolling, skilling centers, and focus what the youth will be doing after the period of the pandemic. And then, of course, the issue of employment orientation. If you look at what we do with our budget on a regular basis, we don't target employment at all. Even the recent budget that we passed, we have no employment target at all, but somehow we assume people will get jobs. We should be able to know that in this budget we have passed, we are targeting creating this number of jobs, and these are the potential sectors where these jobs will come from. So that employment orientation is important for us, so that we are not leaving job creation to chance, that somehow when these things are done, jobs will be created. Because in the past, we have seen what has happened. We have ended up with what we are referring to as a jobless growth. There's growth consistently every year, but the jobs are not yet not there. That's because jobs in themselves are not a target for us. We are not deliberately targeting creating the jobs. And then, of course, ICT, we have seen the importance during this period, but the costs still remain very prohibitive. The cost of internet, even just the cost of telephone calls, people calling from abroad call cheaper than us. So it's quite costly for people to run businesses online and for people to be innovative. We also want the government on point 18 to commit to provision of business development services to small and medium enterprises to help them stay afloat. We all talk about how we are entrepreneurs, but our businesses, thank you, Vice. Our businesses close within 1 or 2 years. They don't last long. They need the technical assistance, they need the support to be able to continue to run. And Chair, we raise with you the issue of fast tracking testing as well. We have heard of the recent innovation at Makerere, which will bring the cost of testing to just about $1.2 which is a huge movement from the current $65 to just basically $1. If we could finance that, the cost last time we were seeing would be maybe in total about 800 billion or something thereabout. Not too high, actually not even a billion, about 700 million or something like that, which is not so high, less than a billion. If we invested less than a billion, we would be able to get cheaper test kits which are readily available locally, and then we can do mass testing. There is no way we will guarantee going back to work without providing certain sampling of a significant nature. And to do significant sampling, we need it to be less costly than it is at the moment. Some of our members have raised their commitment to even support government with food distribution. It's not possible at the moment because it's strictly government doing it. But there are organizations like Red Cross, like TASO, who already have systems of providing food and all this. They could help us do that a lot more quicker. And then, of course, lastly, we are all aware the current budget we have is a pre-COVID budget. Let's revise the budget and make it responsive to the current reality. Now we are looking at a future with COVID. So let the budget also be one that is looking towards that. And Chairperson, in conclusion, I just want to say from our side, we remain optimistic. It's a difficult situation, we acknowledge it, but IMF is also saying that if this thing is managed within at least this part of the year, then it would be possible for global growth to still be high, as high as 5.8%. What is our central message? Make huge public money available for employers, for workers, and for communities. That way we will be able to have everybody engaged. And then we look at it from the point of a demand-led employment strategy for the medium and longer-term recovery of jobs. Chair, I thank you very much for your kind attention, members. Like I said earlier, we are still working on updating this document. It's not comprehensive as we would want to have it. And at an appropriate stage, we request that we resubmit an updated version as we continue to adjust this. But what I present to you now has been approved by the Federation of Uganda Employers Governing Council for presentation to this committee. Thank you so much. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you've done your best. But as you had in the other meeting, we shall demand, we want to request for statistics.
Yeah, we will add more.
Because now you are talking about a beast whose size we don't know. So we'd like you to provide statistics to support your arguments. But I really want to thank you for your proposals. My only worry, you are recommending waiver of all taxes. And government has got to continue providing services. And very soon we shall be reaching our borrowing threshold. So really, I think it has to be a two-way traffic. When you are recommending waiver, you should take into mind, you should consider the obligations of government. Because without government providing a conducive environment, you will not be able to operate your businesses. And the conducive environment is through services which are funded by taxpayers. So I think we need to strike a balance when we are demanding for that. You have in every situation there is an opportunity, and for you people, the employers, you are the ones who have got that big eye to spot opportunities. What opportunities do you see out of this COVID pandemic? What do you see as opportunities? Secondly, you've talked about skilling. skilling the young people. But one of the biggest problems is skilling and without tooling. I think that recommendation somehow to make them practical. When you are skilling them, they should be tooled. And many of these are your providers of raw or semi-finished goods, which you process. They have to be retooled. Many of them are using archaic technologies, which are expensive, which are high energy consumers, and the reason why many of these people bypass their meters. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And when you are skilling, the women are more vulnerable, and as can be proved by the current situation, they are the worst affected. Can you consider having special affirmative action for the women? Some of them, of course, are youth, but even if they are youth, they may not be affected in the same way their male counterparts are affected. Testing equipment. I think this should not be left to government alone. It should be a shared responsibility. You know, when we started these temperature guns, thermal guns, we are very expensive, and to many of us they look like magic. But now they are everywhere. Almost every employer has got one. I think you need to explore opportunities of, if possible, buying your testing facilities. Because if you wait for government is amorphous. It has got a very large territory to cover. May not come to you when you need them. Whereas if it was your own, you'd be able to do it to whoever comes in and whenever you feel that it has to be done. There are employers or companies which were found with purported tax areas. You know, URA has got a problem. They never resolve issues. There are many people whom have been overloaded with taxes, and they have taken ages without a conclusion. And these people are now being caught up in this dilemma. And the businesses, even if they were verified, they cannot afford them. I think this is an area, if we want to provide a stimuli, where you'll be requesting government to assist, to clear the areas. Much of it is uncollectible, and much of it is fictitious. You know how those URA people wake up one day and they put a 2 billion claim on your company, on your business. Yes, that is a serious matter. And the reason why people have failed, because they are fake. And they fail to verify them because they are unjustifiable. So I think that I would think that should come as one of your recommendations, since it affects you greatly. And on technology, many of the employers have tested working from home. Don't you think this is an opportunity? You are going to reduce on the cost of transport. You are going to reduce on the cost of accommodation. Where you needed many offices, people will be working from their homes. And to me, this is an opportunity. I'm happy you have recommended reduction of internet cost. But you should also be able to train your people to be able to partake this modern technology and to continue to encourage them. Because in the end, it's a cost saver. And you know, in business, it's about minimizing costs and maximizing profits. That's how companies become rich. So I think you should take on those opportunities. But also we have a problem of inefficiency in our production processes. I think this is an opportunity for you really to re-examine your production facilities, processes, to eliminate wastages, to eliminate loss of time. There are people who still come in the office and hang their jackets on the chair and say they are at work when they have gone elsewhere. And I think another thing in your recommendation, because there are lots of allegations of corruption, how does this corruption affect you? Under the under the BC, we call it BC, PC, post-COVID.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to reduce this corruption, which is the devil in your businesses. With that, I want to thank you, and will invite my colleagues to make their comments. Honorable Vice.
Well, I thank Mr. Pio for his contribution. And me being a business person, I share a lot of your contributions. How I wish you could do provide our statistics to be convincing that this maybe one little thing missing, which I've not seen. Yes, you say credit, but how? And for who? Sometimes we talk about specific credit lines. Like you have the in agriculture you have ACF, agricultural credit facility, but there are others. I run a school. I don't have a credit line for a school. And some people are saying, we kept money, and there is no money, at all. So specific credit lines for specific things.
The members are not hearing. It seems since you are near the chair, you are only talking the
We operate a decentralized system of government.
Oh, I was saying, and I repeat, I was saying, I agree, businesses need a lot of credit. This is a time for massive spending. But then we are asking how. We need specific recommendations that the central bank should go beyond reducing the CBR to creation or establishment of specific credit lines. We already have a agricultural credit facility, ACF, under Bank of Uganda, but can we have other credit lines which you think can really protect these jobs? Because we know that the social sectors are big employers, but schools are closing, no specific credit line. You have to have a collateral to get credit from the banking system. And even if you have to have collateral, but if there is a specific credit line which is managed through the banking system, even hotels, there is a specific credit line, the tourism sector, the infrastructure you're talking about, to promote tourism. We need to be specific. Aerodromes, moving tourists more easily, We need to be very specific so that we actually boost the productive capacity of this economy. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Atiku.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the EP, Federation of Uganda Employers. Specifically on the recommendation, Madam Chair, I've expected
Have you uploaded the one for KCCA?
to come clear on manufacturers.
How many do we have?
Manufacturers are big employers. And your submissions recognize them. Yes, those are the people who are actually laying off many people or who are being affected greatly. You have talked about the fast tracking of the testing kits. I sit on the National Task Force, and in the few field works we have undertaken, we have actually realized in the treatment and care, a lot of IV fluids are being used. Many of the patients are actually put on IV fluids. And these are simple inputs which we could manufacture from within. But from the records of national medical stores, we are still importing IV fluids from Kenya. And yet Mulago previously had these equipment which were used for manufacturing IV fluids. So when we're talking about bubu, because other economies are now trying to, innovate on how they can cope with the effects of COVID by, initiating new or putting in place new systems to manufacture hitherto items that were imported. Now, in our case, where we're spending a lot of money on buying IV fluids, just like the testing kits, which are being innovated here, I think it will be one of the areas where we need to put as a recommendation to government that there are simple things which we really don't need to import, so that we can save on the little forex that is left in the reserves, and at the same time create employment opportunities. Because if IV, for instance, South Sudan now is in demand for, the cases have gone up, the need of IV fluids, and yet they can no longer access IV fluids from Kenya. We are now our people are beginning to export the little that is there in the pharmacies. So very soon we shall run out of IV fluids as the cases go up, and therefore it's important that some of these things, Madam Chair, we look at them as opportunities for our economy, because if we are to benefit during this COVID period, these are some of the simple items that is needed or required in the fight against COVID. Madam Chair, the issue of support from the private sector, I think it's important that we also look at what needs to be done. For instance, the issue of the testing kits. The innovators are requesting for something less than 1 billion. But we have been seeing companies donating. Coca-Cola, I think, recently gave about 1.3 billion. Now, if such were channeled to this kind of initiatives, we would be already having these testing kits available, the rapid testing kits available. So I think somehow we expect you, who are in the private sector, also to give us guidance on, because when the president was requesting for, is it 4-wheel drive cars and what have you, now, which are the priorities in the case of the response that the country is employing or deploying at the moment? So I think these are some of the areas where we need instant support, where we don't need to take some of this, because the monies that are being collected or fundraised are going into an account where there will be a bureaucracy to get it out. But if such were channeled directly to the innovators, then at the end of the day, we'll have the mass testing kits, which will help to resolve the question of knowing the numbers and then appropriately addressing ourselves to those cases which have been tested positive. Thank you.
When I get clarification, now that our colleague is from the National Task Force, they are talking of this mass testing, and the cost of mass testing is a big cost, because at $65 per person, and we understand in some countries they are testing at $6. Has the National Task Force addressed that? Because it's a big issue. And I understand that if a company, for example, wanted to bring their people and bring them to the Ministry of Health for mass testing, the Ministry of Health or government will want you to pay. Yeah. They don't have a policy where for mass testing at government cost. So have you in the task force addressed that issue of $65 per person instead of the $6 we hear in some countries? Because that actually, if we don't do mass testing, we shall not have a solution to this COVID. Because we are now targeting these truck drivers because they have surrendered themselves to you. Have you gone to a window? If you go to a window market today, it is business as usual. If you go to the tax park and other areas, it is business as usual. So unless we do mass testing, and that will depend on the cost, this, as members of parliament, we seconded you to that committee, so that we know what is happening as members. So when we are interrogating or when we are exchanging with our stakeholders, the employers, the associations, the informal sector, we know what is happening. Can you clarify that to us?
Mr. Chairman, it's very simple. The truth is the cost of testing in Uganda is among the highest. Actually, we have interrogated that with the Minister of Health and the Permanent Secretary, because it has come to also our knowledge that the testing kits actually cost as low as $26. So there's still some verifications going on whether it is 65 or 23 or 26. Secondly, Mr. Chair, I cannot authoritatively speak on the comparison or the figure that my colleague is raising here of $6 because there are varying costs. For instance, some countries have already innovated the rapid test kits, and that's what they're using. It could be even as cheap as $1 per testing kit. So that remains a green area, but also an opportunity for us to fast track the fast testing kits that has been innovated by Makerere University. And the resources required is minimal. So really.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also take the opportunity to thank Federation of Uganda Employers. Mine, I'll be brief. I'm on page 8, on recommendation 9. Invest in infrastructure. Can we take infrastructure now when we can't struggle to have liquidity, to have people to have money? Can we invest in those capital projects now? Because you are saying it is labor intensive. Yes, it can be labor intensive. Constructing a road in Kampala, can it help the use of other people, labor force in Mbale to also benefit from themselves? So to me, I think we need to revisit what we should have is we are looking at liquidity. I heard some scholars, the economists, say, government should suspend all this infrastructure for some time. You have to look at that. Number 21 on page 9, food distribution. This is the last resort. It's not an issue which one could say we have to involve. Actually, we could encourage people to see how to produce their own food. Recently, I went to my home area. I gave them 2 scenarios. 3. My home area is Bulamburi. Largely the youth and whatever people who have been there. Should I give you food? That was one question. Should I provide you with planting materials? For us to plant onions and what? Or you want cash? Actually, the majority of them wanted planting materials. Because they say no food, we can survive. I think we should not encourage government, because first of all, it is not sustainable. You are complaining that Kampala, people, there was a previous presenter here who said people have not gotten food here in Kampala. And it's a fact. So I think we should not look at an area which you would advise government. Now, lastly, you 22 on page 10, we are saying we revise the national budget. You want us to revise upward or downward? Since we are now struggling, first of all, the economy has collapsed. You get it? So, no, it's a fact.
The economy is on drip.
So should we revise it upward to take it to account, or should not on the other trend of my uncle Madiaga saying? So should we revise it down or upward trend? I want to be guided on that.
Yes, Chair. I want to thank Federation of Uganda Employers on this position paper. Actually, it's one of the best position papers we have had so far. And I imagine they're also copying from other areas along the world.
They come from Uganda and
Chair, the association has given a quite range of recommendations. Actually, I'm happy with the recommendation number 9, contrary to what my colleague is saying there. In Kenya, they have recommended, because infrastructure has been washed away, these footbridges, these access roads, which can be repaired locally by local people. If we are talking of Bubu, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, some of these jobs can be given to local people like the youth movements and local labor. they would be therefore building capacity. The money that you are giving to big contractors can be retained in the economy. The other one which I want to talk about was this voluntary testing. I think must be taken seriously, because if we are trying to accommodate this COVID, we don't know when it will end. Community testing must be attended to by government. So I appreciate that recommendation, and as stakeholders, you should raise it in many other forums, when you meet a prime minister, when you meet a president, as associations, because you have a voice. Voluntary testing and in-mass testing. The issue of budget, my colleague has been talked about. What is true is that the national budget, as we are going to read it this or next week, does not take into account the effects of COVID. So it is true, government must address the realities of the current pandemic by immediately the budget is passed. We have to sit down and actually pass another budget. We tried to raise it in Parliament, but they said it was too late. We had timelines, and we don't have a comprehensive facts on and effects. So it is true, and we must emphasize this to us and government, that we have to look at this budget and focus it on the post-COVID effects. I thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just to supplement on, because revising the budget, the major issue is revenue shortfalls. Can we, some people have asked, can we hit those estimated revenues? And if not, can we borrow more from which sources? If we are to maintain the level of spending and yet we want to spend more? These are questions you want to answer from. Honorable Peter.
Why collapse it when we can realign?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank the contributor for this.
I don't think
I totally agree with all these suggestions. I'm especially excited about the fact that I'm especially excited about the possibility of convincing government to invest in infrastructure. I mean, just about every country that's in a crisis, after the Second World War, after the First World War, after any crisis, one of the ways that economies build themselves is to invest in infrastructure. It's literally money that would have been given away free of charge, except that on top of giving it to the public, you're also building the infrastructure off of which the economy would be built. So I think it's a great paper. And vis-a-vis item number 22, the national budget, yes, I agree with what Honorable Kajara has just shared with us, and that we totally agree with your perception of that being a remedy, because as it is, the budget is absolutely not relevant to the realities on the ground. And so it needs to be adjusted as soon as we can. Of course, it's the timelines that couldn't allow us to do it before now. And in that would be a lot of lessons to be taken from how the COVID pandemic has affected other countries where some kind of community spread has started. We have been able to avoid it for now, and thank God for that, but I don't think we should take it for granted when I look at the figures as they're happening the last couple of days, that's going to be absolutely, that we're going to be able to maintain the wonderful record that we have right now. So yes, there's a need to revise the budget. However, the main reason I wanted to talk, the main reason I'd raised my hand is I wanted to address Honorable Atiku, who sits on the task force, but unfortunately he's not here. He said that if we had only $1 billion, this company that wants to create these testing kits requires only $1 billion, and they as a task force are raising billions and billions. Why don't they provide that money that they've raised to that organization and get the kits? I mean, it's so simple, and yet I rest my case.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I wish also to thank the Federation of Uganda Employers for a wonderful presentation. There's a point in the presentation where they had raised the issue of interest rates from the banks. But you need to factor into that aspect that majority of our banks, you can say, are foreign or have a strong foreign component in the banking sector. And when you look at the interest rates, if I borrow in dollars, the interest rate is far lower than if I borrow in shillings. because there's also a factor of the risk of depreciation of the Uganda shilling. In the context of this global pandemic and looking at the areas which you highlighted, the horticulture area, the beverage sector, real estate, tourism, all of those areas have a foreign component. And many of those will be outside the grasp of our economy because we're all in an area which is totally undefined. We don't know where exactly it's going to go. The stimulus you raised about in the US economy, it has shown mixed signals. A lot of money was injected. First, there's still a continued slide in the stock exchange. Stock exchange is rising, but the real economy, where is it falling in? So in all of this, we're grappling. Area you raised of government should remove taxes. You may also need to recommend that if you're removing taxes here, you must also cut expenditure in another area. Because already we're going to have shortfalls in revenue, and if we're to remove further taxes, that means other areas are going to slide. So we need to look at it in context that if we are taking out these tax collections, where are we getting our resources from, and which are the priority areas which we need to concentrate on to restart the economy. So in all of this as a committee, we're trying to see how best we can take more informed decisions to try and see how we can mitigate the effects of COVID, how it's going to affect our economy, and how we're going to deal with it. But there's no manual. Globally, right now, there's no manual, there's no precedent of this sort of thing, and we're going to be affected. And a lot of our revenues, like our foreign exchange, is for our workers abroad. In those economies, like you said, in the US, over 30 million have lost jobs. How many of those are Ugandans? So we're going to have less remittances, which is going to cause the Uganda shilling to slide against the dollar, which is also going to have knock-on effects. So all of these, let us try and see how best we can factor in to try our level best to see how we get out of this issue with minimum scarring as possible. But otherwise, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I'm surprised you don't know your member. I think you haven't been around. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank these people for their recommendation. I'm basically going to focus on the proposed policy. You see, everybody is giving their proposal from the perspective where they're seeing the economy from. And these are very strong recommendations. Because where you are starting from, you are not looking at the whole economy, you are still under 6%. So I appreciate what you've given us, because you are giving us this from your own perspective. That from the angle where you are standing, that's where you see. Because when you look at all these other policy options and recommendations you've given, there are many others that are clearly missing. And at the end of it all, of course, it will be a validation for us in this committee to look from your perspective, look from others, and then be able to consolidate. Mr. Chairman, when I look at recommendation number 7, you are talking about government procurement. Yes, granted, build Uganda, but this build Uganda must also be looked in critically, because there are people who are positioned themselves to build themselves. You know, now, but you see, if you look at build Uganda, you must look at the entire economy, the entire structure of the economy, which I think when you are giving this kind of recommendation, you should not limit it at that, because then you are going to limit it to some few middle class group of people who are actually in the capital, trying to seize and take advantage of each and every opportunity. And you've seen them on TV. They've even come with proposals already there, how the economy should be moving. I just want to give you one example, food procurement alone. You've seen the food procurement in the office of the Prime Minister. How many food suppliers are there throughout the country who need to be supported? We have suppliers in Fort Portal, we have suppliers in Chenjojo, we have suppliers in Ugulu, we have suppliers in and they are better beans, and they are better posho, and they are producing. But look at this kind of thing. Because the moment we again refocus this economy and at this time to this category of people in town, we are not going to solve the problem that COVID would have brought. Because the businesses outside there are going to crumble. Employment sector is going to be affected. Their capital base is going to be destroyed, and they will not be able to withstand, the consequences of this. So it must be structured in such a way that, everybody, every structure within the economy will be able to benefit. Because short of that, there will also be a problem. Number 21, I also want to concur with my brother, Honorable Kajara. You see, food distribution, from where? And for how long? You see, let us look at what is happening today. Is it an emergency short-term flood which came and went? Or it is something that is still in existence? Because if you are talking about things like flood, yes, flood, you can say, you can even quantify the destruction. But now you cannot quantify what COVID-19 has done and say, okay, we think if we give this quantity of food, this would be sustainable for this period of time. So I think this thing of food distribution is, of course, is political. Me, I'm a politician. I actually don't adhere to. We rather focus on production. Let us look in a way of how we can support so that food prices come down. Because if you go to Oiba, for example, and you support those local farmers, definitely I can tell you, you're going to get more maize in the market, more posho in the market, and therefore costs will come down. And we are being favored by rain, we're being favored by, but at the moment nobody seems to think about that. People are just saying food distribution, but food distribution from where? Where is government going to get this money to buy food for everybody? Even in Kampala, the initial people who got this food are now complaining. The food went. So I think let us be realistic when we're looking at some of these things and focus at production. So we would rather focus at food production than thinking about this. And lastly, Chair, the issue of their presentation is okay. Of course, they concluded with number 22 about revising the national budget. But they also fell short of giving us, because this national budget, you've seen it, you've seen the structure. Why are you unable to come and say cost of public administration must come down? Yes, let's be frank that this budget must focus at production. There are elements in the budget which are actually unsustainable. For example, we have in this budget travel abroad, every ministry, every government department. But now where are they going to travel? As our vice chair, as our chair just said, now things have been made easy. People will now have to do business by Zoom. So you don't need to fly. Now, can we adjust this? So I thought that you would be able also to give us in detail that yes, we revise the budget, but where can we revise? And if we revise this, where can we put the money? You have the budget framework in place. You should be able to come out and guide the country and say, yes, from what is here. Because if you see in ministries, there are many things that are hidden, and they call them capacity building. Now, capacity building to go where? Why don't we get all this funding, take it to health? People are crying about testing. There are universities who want to be supported just to do testing and all this. Get some of this funding, take it to health. Get some of this funding so that capacity building can wait, travel abroad can wait, and many of these public administration costs can remain. And finally, you see, you gave a very good presentation, a very good solution. But, you see, the informal sector, you miss it out. The bulk of our economy is informally structured. I hear in Kampala, people may not even go to banks, but if you open them warehouses, construction will continue going because they will be able to buy building material. So you ask yourself, where do they keep the money? They sleep on the money. So they have the money, and they're going to continue doing that. And if you are going to get your liquidity based on what is drawn from the bank, then you're going to misfire. Because people are sleeping on dollars, people are sleeping on Uganda shillings, and they just draw cash and go and buy building material, and you see buildings shooting up. They have not got cash from the bank. So these are some of the things that we should be mindful when we're looking at this kind of economy of ours, because it is not really the real Western economy.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to continue from where Honorable Reagan stopped. Two sides of the budget. We have the revenue and expenditure. Now, a lot of demands from government at the moment is on increasing expenditure. Because when we are talking about tax waivers in the recommendations here, pay as you earn waivers, tax credit, VAT waivers, offer 100% income tax relief. Chair, all these are aimed at increasing expenditures and reducing the revenue side of the budget. As Honorable Jimmy said, we need to find out how are we going to increase the revenue side to meet the expenditure of government that we are trying to ask. Say, government, we need this from government, we need this from government as a measure. So you are telling us how we can increase the expenditure, but you are not telling us how this revenue comes about so that we have a balanced budget. Number two, I expect when we are discussing this matter, we should look at companies. We are trying to talk in generalities. COVID has affected the economy and businesses in three ways. Other businesses have made abnormal profits during this COVID. Others have made normal profits. Others have made losses. So the concern of government is to rescue the companies which made losses. Is there a way we can rescue these people by mopping away the abnormal profits of the companies that made abnormal profits, and use that to finance those ones who made losses in the three, and you do nothing to the people who have made normal profits? Those are the actions I expect. If there is a study to know who are these people who made abnormal profits. For example, personally, I think the people who are dealing with in pharmacy made a lot of money.
This one is now 1,000.
Yes.
Which was 500.
Yes, they made a lot of money during this time of COVID. Vitamin C, which used to be like 500 a box, it is 20,000. That is abnormal profits. It is possible to... Yes, exactly. These are companies that have made abnormal profits. See how to tax them, tax these abnormal profits, mop it out to bail out people who have made losses, and do nothing to people who have made normal profits. Can we have that study? Can the economists help us? And can government help us to have a study of people who have businesses which made abnormal profits, which ones made normal profits, and which ones made losses, so that we rescue the business which made losses by taxing abnormal profits and bring them to order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not repeating, and I'm going to be brief and precise. I would like to inform the FUE
Petrol stations have made losses.
yes, that this committee is ahead of time. We're in the process of capitalization, looking at UDB, looking at development banks and microfinance. This kind of capitalization, we're looking at a subsidized amount of money, approximately between 8 and 10%. The idea behind it is to support the employers. So your part should be how best can we protect the employees. We put strong regulations such that the employers do not terminate services of employees, because we're ready to give you money and soon you're hearing this out. I'm just giving you some information behind it. Thank you.
Okay. Can we hear from? Sorry, you have
Yes, I wanted to. In the recommendations, they don't recommend the unlocking. What is their view about opening up? Because there are so many economies that have opened up. Schools are business, manufacturing business as usual, and maybe what is your recommendation as a federation?
Okay, can we hear from the chief executive of the Uganda Employers Association? And